My name is Audrey Wilson, 34 years old, and until last Monday, I was the marketing director at Preston & Shaw, one of the most prestigious firms in Connecticut. When they laid me off, citing budget cuts, despite my stellar performance, I said nothing about the tech company I secretly owned or the beach house in my name. That same night, my father Henry looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Pack your bags. Failures don't belong here." Then my husband Richard spit on me before walking out with his mistress. I never imagined losing everything in 24 hours, but what happened next changed everything. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how they all came to regret their actions. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Springfield, where my father worked his way up from salesman to regional manager at a manufacturing company. From childhood, Henry instilled in me the belief that success was the only acceptable outcome in life. Every report card needed straight A's. Every competition needed a first-place trophy. Second place meant I simply had not tried hard enough. When I graduated college with honors from Boston University, I immediately jumped into the corporate world working 60-hour weeks to prove myself. While my friends were out enjoying their 20s, I was hunched over my laptop, determined to make my father proud. The approval I sought rarely came. Instead, each achievement was met with good. Now, what is next? 5 years ago, at a business conference in New York, I met Richard Blackwood. He was charming, confident, and worked as a sales executive for a pharmaceutical company. His smile caught my attention from across the room, and by the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. Our romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were engaged, and by the following spring, we were married in a lavish ceremony that my father mostly paid for, reminding me frequently of his generosity. We bought a beautiful colonial-style house in an upscale Connecticut suburb. From the outside, our life seemed perfect. Richard drove a luxury German car. I climbed the corporate ladder at Preston & Shaw, eventually becoming their marketing director by the age of 31. We hosted dinner parties where guests commented on our beautiful home and seemingly perfect marriage. But behind closed doors, things were different. As my career continued to flourish, Richard grew increasingly resentful. What started as playful jokes about my dedication to work turned into passive-aggressive comments. Another late night, "I guess Preston & Shaw owns you now." When I received my last promotion, Richard barely acknowledged it, changing the subject to a deal he was working on. The more successful I became, the more distant he grew. My relationship with my father remained complicated. Every Sunday dinner at my parents' suburban mansion became an interrogation about my career progress. My father would press for details about my salary, my projects, my next moves. My mother Elaine would sit quietly, occasionally patting my hand under the table when my father became particularly critical. She had spent 38 years in his shadow, and though I could see the sympathy in her eyes, she never contradicted him. "You need to aim for CMO by 35, Audrey," my father would say, cutting into his steak without looking up. "Preston & Shaw has had the same chief marketing officer for 7 years. He must be ready to retire." Henry let her enjoy her dinner. My mother would attempt only to be silenced by his dismissive wave. Meanwhile, at work, things began to change when new management took over Preston & Shaw 18 months ago. The collaborative environment I had thrived in slowly transformed into something more cutthroat. Martin Davis, the new vice president of marketing, who became my direct supervisor, seemed to undermine me at every turn. Projects I had initiated were suddenly reassigned. My input in meetings was frequently interrupted or dismissed. Then strange things started happening. Presentations I had prepared would mysteriously have errors when opened in client meetings. Emails I was certain I had sent would be missing from my outbox. Client feedback that was positive would be reported to upper management as mixed or negative. Rumors about downsizing began circulating through the office. Several longtime employees from other departments were let go, always with the same explanation: budget cuts. Susan Parker, my colleague from the creative team, warned me during a coffee break. "They are pushing out the old guard, Audrey," she whispered. "Anyone who was here before the new management is at risk. They want their own people." What no one at work or in my family knew was that 3 years ago, my grandfather had left me a surprising inheritance. We had been close throughout my childhood, and he had secretly invested in technology stocks that performed extremely well. The inheritance came with a letter that read, "Audrey, always have your own safety net. Independence is the greatest form of security." Taking his advice to heart, I used part of the inheritance to purchase a beautiful beach house in Rhode Island, putting it solely in my name. I also invested in a promising startup tech company called Horizon Digital. What began as a small investment grew substantially as the company flourished, eventually giving me a significant ownership stake. I kept these financial decisions private. Richard had made comments whenever I made independent choices, suggesting that marriages should not have secrets. My father would have insisted I invest the money according to his advice, or criticized me for not using it to move into a more prestigious neighborhood. The beach house became my secret sanctuary, a place I visited occasionally under the guise of work retreats or girls' weekends. My financial independence remained my closely guarded secret, a safety net I never thought I would need to use. But as my work environment grew increasingly hostile and my marriage more strained, I found myself thinking about that beach house more and more often. I never imagined how quickly things would unravel or how soon I would need that safety net my grandfather had encouraged me to create. Monday mornings at Preston and Shaw typically began with department meetings, and this particular Monday seemed no different. I arrived early as usual, preparing notes for my presentation on the quarterly marketing strategy. The conference room gradually filled with my team members, but I noticed several unfamiliar faces from human resources, among them including Pamela Winters, the HR director, who rarely attended our meetings. Martin Davis entered last, avoiding eye contact with me as he took his seat at the head of the table. Before I could begin my presentation, he cleared his throat. "Before we start, I have an announcement," Martin said, his voice unnaturally formal. "As part of our ongoing restructuring, we are making changes to the marketing department effective immediately." My stomach tightened as every eye in the room turned toward me. "Audrey Wilson will be leaving Preston and Shaw today. We thank her for her contributions and wish her the best in future endeavors." The room fell silent. My team members looked down at their notepads or stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to pity. I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. "This is a joke, right?" I finally managed to say. "I assure you, it is not," Pamela from HR interjected, sliding a folder across the table. "This contains information about your severance package and continuation of benefits. We will need you to clear out your personal items today." "On what grounds am I being terminated?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "We are eliminating your position due to departmental restructuring," Pamela replied mechanically. "This is not a performance-based decision." That was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. I had consistently exceeded my targets, brought in major clients, and received excellent reviews until Martin took over. "Security will assist you in gathering your belongings," Pamela continued. "Company policy for director-level departures." The humiliation of being escorted out by security burned through me as I packed up my office under the watchful eye of a guard named Thomas, who apologetically stood by the door. My family photos industry awards and the small plant I had kept alive for 5 years all went into a cardboard box. When I tried to access my computer to save personal contacts, I discovered my login had already been deactivated. My files, including personal photos and documents, were now inaccessible. They had clearly planned this well in advance. As I was about to leave, Susan slipped into my office, quickly embracing me, before whispering, "Martin has been meeting with clients behind your back for weeks. This is not about budget. Call me later." The security guard escorted me through the office, past colleagues who averted their eyes, down the elevator, and all the way to my car in the parking garage. As I placed the box in my trunk, the reality began to sink in. After 7 years of dedication, 60-hour weeks, missed vacations, and sacrificed personal time, I had been discarded without warning. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, too stunned to cry. My phone buzzed with text messages from team members expressing shock and support, but they felt hollow. These same people had watched in silence as I was escorted out. The drive home was a blur. I rehearsed how I would tell Richard, imagining he might finally step up and support me through this crisis. Perhaps this shared adversity would even bring us closer. When I pulled into our driveway at 11:30 in the morning, I was surprised to see Richard's car already there. He rarely came home during workdays. For a moment, I felt relief. I would not have to wait to share my news. I entered through the garage, calling out Richard, "You home? Something happened at work." The house was quiet, except for muffled sounds coming from upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, I noticed Richard's briefcase and jacket thrown haphazardly on the staircase, unusual for his typically tidy habits. The bedroom door was partially open. I pushed it wider and froze. Richard was hastily dressing, his hair disheveled. The shower was running in our master bathroom. "Audrey, what are you doing home?" His voice cracked with panic. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glimpsed the screen, a message from someone named Jessica with 3 heart emojis. "Who is Jessica?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Richard's face transitioned from shock to anger in seconds. "Why are you snooping through my phone, and why are you not at work?" "I just got fired," I said flatly. "And you did not answer my question." The bathroom door opened, and a young woman appeared wrapped in my bathrobe. She looked to be in her mid-20s with long blonde hair. She froze upon seeing me. "You must be Jessica," I said, surprising myself with my calm tone. "Audrey, this is not what it looks like," Richard began using his sales pitch voice. "Really? Because it looks like you are having an affair in our bed in our home on a Monday morning when you should be at work." Jessica grabbed her clothes and retreated to the bathroom. Richard's expression hardened. "This would not have happened if you had been a real wife instead of a career-obsessed robot," he spat out. "When was the last time you were actually present in this marriage?" "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, ignoring his attempt to blame me. 6 months, he admitted with a shocking lack of remorse. "Jessica understands me. She makes me a priority." 6 months. Half a year of lies. All those late nights he claimed to be working or having drinks with clients he had been with her. "I want both of you out of my house," I said, my hands shaking. Richard laughed. "Your house? I pay half the mortgage. And speaking of money, how is that going to work now that you are unemployed?" The cruel smile that spread across his face told me everything. He had been waiting, perhaps, hoping for my career to stumble. "How did you know I lost my job? I just found out 2 hours ago." Richard's momentary confusion gave way to another smirk. "I did not know. But I am not surprised. You have been distracted for months." I stepped closer to him. "Get out. We can discuss the house and finances later through lawyers." "Lawyers?" He laughed again. "On what money, Audrey? Your daddy's? Do you think he will support you now that you have failed?" Something in me snapped. I grabbed the framed photo of our wedding day from the dresser and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor. Richard's face contorted with rage. He stepped toward me, his finger pointing in my face. "You psychotic bitch. You have nothing without me. Nothing." Then he did something I never imagined possible. He spit in my face. The warm saliva hit my cheek as I stood paralyzed with shock. "Jessica and I were planning to tell you this weekend anyway," he said, pulling a suitcase from the closet and throwing clothes into it. "She is moving in with me. We will be using my bonus to put a down payment on a condo downtown." Jessica emerged from the bathroom, fully dressed, avoiding eye contact, as she quickly gathered her purse and phone. "You can keep this suburban prison," Richard continued. "I never wanted it anyway. It was always your father's idea of success, not mine." My phone rang, cutting through the tension. My father's name flashed on the screen. "Perfect timing," Richard sneered. "Daddy calling to check on his little girl. Maybe he can fix this mess for you too." I declined the call, but moments later a text appeared. "Come to the house immediately. Your mother and I need to speak with you." Richard zipped his suitcase and grabbed Jessica's hand. At the bedroom door, he turned back to me. I will be back for the rest of my things. Do not change the locks if you know what is good for you." And then they were gone. I heard the front door slam, followed by the sound of Richard's car backing out of the driveway. I stood in my bedroom, my career and marriage shattered within hours of each other. And now, based on my father's message, there was more to come. The 20-minute drive to my parents' house in Fairfield gave me little time to compose myself. I attempted to wipe away my tears at red lights, applied concealer to the dark circles forming under my eyes, and practiced explanations that might satisfy my father. Nothing seemed adequate. Their house stood imposing as ever at the end of a circular driveway, a 5-bedroom colonial on 2 acres of perfectly landscaped property. My father had purchased it 15 years ago when he became CEO of his company, a constant physical reminder of his definition of success. My mother opened the door before I could ring the bell. "He is in his study," she whispered, her eyes conveying both sympathy and warning. "William is here too." My younger brother William had always been the peacemaker in the family, strategically positioned between my father's expectations and reality. He worked for my father's company, carefully navigating the nepotism while maintaining enough independence to keep his sanity. I found them in the study, my father behind his mahogany desk, William uncomfortably perched on the leather sofa. Neither stood when I entered. "Sit down, Audrey," my father instructed, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk, positioning me like an employee being reviewed. "I prefer to stand," I replied, summoning what little strength remained. My father's jaw tightened. "I received a concerning call from Martin Davis this afternoon. He is an old golf buddy of mine." Of course he was. The connection I had never known about suddenly explained so much about the past 18 months. "Martin informed me that you were let go from Preston and Shaw today. He said they had concerns about your commitment and performance for some time." "That is completely false," I said, my voice rising. "I was their top-performing director. This was political, not performance-based." My father waved his hand dismissively. "There are always 2 sides to these situations, Audrey. The important question is, what is your plan? No sympathy, no benefit of the doubt, just immediate pressure for a solution." "I just lost my job 6 hours ago, Dad. I do not have a fully formed plan yet." "This is exactly the problem," he replied, standing to emphasize his point. "You have always lacked foresight. Success requires anticipation of obstacles." My mother entered with a tray of coffee, her traditional peace offering during family conflicts. "Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes, she announced to no one in particular. "I did not realize I was staying for dinner," I said. "Of course you are," my father replied. "We need to discuss your next steps. William may have connections at Brunswick Marketing." William shifted uncomfortably. "I could make some calls," he offered, his tone suggesting the futility of such efforts. "I appreciate that, but I need some time to process what happened today," I said. My father scoffed. "Time is a luxury for the successful, Audrey. You need to be sending out resumes tonight." "There is more," I said, deciding to rip off both bandages at once. "Richard and I are separating. I caught him with another woman today." The room fell silent. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. William stared at the floor. "Well," my father finally said, "perhaps if you had focused more on your marriage and less on climbing the corporate ladder, this would not have happened." His words hit me like a physical blow. "Are you actually blaming me for Richard's affair?" "Henry," my mother interjected, "that is not fair." "Life is not fair, Elaine," he snapped. "And Audrey needs to hear the truth. You pushed for that promotion last year despite Richard's concerns about your hours. You insisted on taking that business trip to London when you should have been at his company dinner. Actions have consequences." I could not believe what I was hearing. Richard has been cheating for 6 months with a woman from his office. How exactly is that my fault? "Men have needs, Audrey," my father replied, as if explaining something to a child. "When wives become too independent, too career-focused, men often seek validation elsewhere." "That is disgusting," I whispered. "It is reality," he countered. "Now, you have lost both your job and your marriage in the same day. What does that tell you about your priorities?" My mother attempted again to diffuse the situation. Let us discuss this over dinner. I made your favorite chicken, Audrey. We moved to the dining room in tense silence. The elaborate table setting with fine china and crystal glasses felt absurdly formal given the circumstances. I spoke with Richard this afternoon, my father announced as we took our seats. The revelation stunned me. You, what? He called me very upset. He said you threw things and became hysterical when he suggested a separation. He was in our bed with another woman, I exclaimed. And he did not suggest a separation. He spit in my face and walked out with her. That does not sound like Richard, my father replied calmly. He has always been level-headed. I am sure you are exaggerating. Why would I make that up? I demanded. Because you are emotional right now, he said. Richard mentioned you have been unstable lately, possibly due to work stress. My brother finally spoke up. Dad, maybe we should hear Audrey's side fully before jumping to conclusions. My father ignored him. Richard also mentioned financial concerns now that you are unemployed. He worried about your spending habits. I laughed bitterly. My spending habits: Richard bought a $40,000 watch last month. He leases a new car every 2 years. Nevertheless, my father continued, you need to consider your financial situation seriously. Your mother and I cannot support poor decisions. I have not asked for your support, I said quietly. Not yet, he replied. But without a job and with a divorce looming, it is only a matter of time. I put down my fork, my appetite completely gone. I will figure this out on my own. How your skill set is specific to a company that just fired you. Your industry is small and word travels fast. Martin mentioned they might provide a reference if you leave quietly, but that goodwill has an expiration date. I have savings, I said, though the joint account Richard and I shared was likely already emptied. Enough for a mortgage, lawyers, and living expenses for how long? 3 months? 6. My father shook his head. This is why I always told you to plan for worst-case scenarios. Henry, my mother said softly, perhaps now is not the time for lectures. Then when Elaine, after she has bankrupted herself, after she has damaged her reputation beyond repair, he turned back to me. You have 1 week to secure new employment, something comparable to what you had. Otherwise, do not come back to this house with complaints or requests for help. You cannot be serious, I whispered. I am always serious about success and failure, Audrey. You know that. I did not raise my children to make excuses or accept defeat. I did not fail, I insisted. I was pushed out by your golf buddy after years of excellent performance. Results are what matter in this world, he replied coldly. And right now your results show failure on all fronts. I stood up abruptly, my chair screeching against the hardwood floor. Thank you for dinner, Mom. I think I should go. Audrey, please, my mother began, but my father cut her off. Let her go, Elaine. Perhaps some time alone will help her reflect on her choices. As I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my father called after me. Remember what I said, Audrey. 1 week to get your life in order. Pack your bags and figure out where you are going from here. Failures do not belong in this family. The drive away from my parents' house was a blur of tears and anger. I had lost my job, discovered my husband's infidelity, and been rejected by my family all in a single day. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and no idea what tomorrow would bring. The Harbor View Hotel was not particularly luxurious, but it was clean and anonymous. The desk clerk barely glanced at me as I checked in, for which I was grateful given my tear-stained face and disheveled appearance. Room 214 would be my home tonight, possibly longer. I sat on the edge of the queen-sized bed, surrounded by the generic hotel decor, and finally allowed myself to fully break down. The sobs came from someplace deep in primal years of suppressed emotions erupting at once. I cried for my lost career, my betrayed trust, my father's cruelty, and my mother's silent complicity. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. When the initial wave of emotion subsided, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Sarah, my college roommate, and one of the few friends I had maintained despite my workaholic lifestyle. 2 from Megan, my neighbor, who had become a close confidant. A text from William Dad was way out of line. Call if you need anything. I called Sarah first, her familiar voice instantly comforting. Audrey, where are you? I have been trying to reach you for hours. I am at the Harborview Hotel, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. Everything fell apart today, Sarah. Everything. I heard about Preston and Shaw. Susan called me. That is complete garbage how they treated you. You know, Susan, we met at your holiday party last year. We have kept in touch. She said the whole office is in shock. I had no idea they had connected, which made me realize how disconnected I had become from my own life, how little attention I had paid to the relationships around me. Richard was cheating, I added. I caught him today with some woman from his office, and my father basically told me I deserved it for focusing too much on my career. That absolute bastard, Sarah exclaimed, and I wasn't sure if she meant Richard or my father. Both applied. Stay where you are, she continued. I am coming to you, and Megan is with me. We will be there in 30 minutes. True to her word, Sarah arrived with Megan and an overnight bag. They brought wine, chocolate, and their unwavering support. For the first time that day, I felt something other than despair. You need to get a lawyer immediately, Megan advised. She had gone through a divorce 2 years earlier. Richard will try to claim half of everything, and given what you have told us about him, he will not play fair. Diane Hopkins, I remembered suddenly. She helped me set up the beach house purchase and my investment in Horizon Digital. You have a beach house? Sarah asked, surprised. I had never told them about the inheritance or my secret investments. It had become such a habit to keep these things private that I had maintained the secrecy even with my closest friends. My grandfather left me an inheritance 3 years ago, I explained. I used it to buy a place in Rhode Island and invest in a tech startup. Richard does not know. Neither does my family. Megan smiled for the first time that evening. Audrey Wilson, you magnificent secret keeper, that could be your saving grace right now. While they ordered room service, I began taking inventory of what I actually had versus what I had lost. Lost my 60-hour-per-week job, my marriage, my family's support, my house potentially, my sense of security. Had a beach house in my name only, a significant ownership stake in a growing tech company, my education and experience, my professional reputation despite Preston and Shaw's efforts, and apparently friends who would drop everything to sit in a hotel room with me on the worst day of my life. I opened my laptop and pulled up the documents related to Horizon Digital. My initial investment of $50,000 from my inheritance had grown substantially as the company secured additional funding rounds. According to the last valuation, my stake was worth over $2 million on paper. The beach house purchased for $400,000 had likely appreciated as well. You need to protect these assets before Richard discovers them, Megan urged. Call Diane first thing tomorrow. While scrolling through my emails, I noticed one from Zoe, my former assistant at Preston and Shaw, sent just hours after I was escorted out. Martin deleted all your files, but I backed everything up last week when things started feeling weird. I have copies of all your work client contacts and the emails where Martin took credit for your Phillips campaign. Call me when you can. Loyal, perceptive Zoe. I had always appreciated her attention to detail, but never imagined how valuable it would become. Another email caught my attention. This one from Susan. Check your junk folder for emails from David Nichols from the past 3 months. Martin has been filtering your messages. David Nichols was our biggest client. I immediately checked my junk folder and found dozens of emails from David, including several expressing confusion about why I had stopped responding to his messages and concerns about recent campaign directions. They sabotaged you, Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. They deliberately isolated you from your clients. Martin Davis is my father's golf buddy, I said. He has probably been feeding my father information for months while setting me up to fail. A text message alert interrupted our conversation. It was from Richard. Checked our joint account. Needed to secure funds for upcoming expenses. We can discuss division of assets with lawyers. I quickly logged into our bank account to find it completely emptied. $45,000 gone. Can he do that? Sarah asked. Legally, yes. It is a joint account, Megan explained. But a judge will take this into consideration during divorce proceedings. Document everything. As the night progressed, we formulated a plan. I would call Diane first thing in the morning to begin divorce proceedings and protect my assets. I would move to the beach house temporarily until things settled. I would use Zoe's backed-up files to establish what had really happened at Preston and Shaw. Around midnight, Sarah and Megan finally fell asleep on the second queen bed, but I remained awake, my mind racing with everything that had transpired and everything that needed to be done. I remembered my grandfather's words from his letter, "Independence is the greatest form of security." He had known somehow that I would need this safety net. Perhaps he had recognized in me the same drive that had isolated me from authentic relationships. Perhaps he had seen how my pursuit of my father's approval had led me to ignore my own needs. Or perhaps he had simply wanted to give me options his own daughter, my mother, had never had. By dawn, my tears had dried and a new emotion had taken their place: determination. I had spent my entire life seeking validation from my father and later from Richard. I had pursued external markers of success while neglecting to define success for myself. That ended today. As the first light of morning filtered through the cheap hotel curtains, I made 3 promises to myself. 1. I would rebuild my life on my own terms, not according to anyone else's definition of success. 2. I would never again make myself small or silent to accommodate someone else's ego. 3. I would remember this feeling of rock bottom, not to dwell in it, but to recognize how far I would climb from here. I picked up my phone and dialed Diane Hopkins' number. When her voicemail answered, I left a clear, concise message. "Diane, this is Audrey Wilson. I need your help protecting my assets and beginning divorce proceedings. Also, I may have a wrongful termination case to discuss. Please call me as soon as possible." Next, I texted Zoe. "Can you meet today? I need those files and your insights on what really happened." The night of devastation had transformed into a morning of action. And for the first time in my adult life, I was acting solely for myself, not to please my father or support my husband or impress my colleagues. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. As Sarah and Megan stirred awake, I made one final call to the beach house caretaker, arranging to have the place prepared for my arrival. It was time to claim the safety net my grandfather had helped me create. It was time to disappear from the life everyone thought they knew and emerge as the woman I was meant to be. Diane Hopkins' office projected exactly the kind of confidence I needed. Located in downtown Hartford, the corner suite featured floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture and walls, adorned with her law degrees and professional recognitions. Diane herself, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with prematurely silver hair, had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had broken countless glass ceilings.